The first time I met the alien sisters, I was not a hero. I was a salvage technician with a cracked helmet seal, a dying ship, and a contract that paid just enough to keep my name off the debtors list. The universe has a way of choosing its witnesses poorly. I was working the outer debris fields of the Karen Expanse, where old battles drift forever in slow, glittering spirals. The war that created that graveyard had ended decades before I was born, but the wreckage remained. Hulks of cruisers split like fruit, escape pods fused into strange constellations, weapons that still hummed faintly with forgotten power. Most scavengers avoided the deeper zones. The radiation spikes were unpredictable, and sometimes the sensors picked up movement where nothing alive should have been. That was where I found them. My ship, the Wayfarer's Luck, lurched as something struck the hull. Alarms bloomed across my console, red and urgent. I swore, cutting thrust and bringing the ship about. The scanners resolved a small craft, sleek, unfamiliar, badly damaged, tumbling end over end. It wasn't transmitting a distress call. It wasn't transmitting anything at all. I could have left it. Most salvagers would have. But as the craft spun, a section of its hull peeled back, and for a heartbeat, I saw movement inside. Two figures, clinging to the interior like stars about to be flung into the void. I docked. The airlock cycled with a groan that told me it might not cycle again. Inside the alien craft, the atmosphere was thin but breathable, tinged with a sharp, metallic scent. The sisters were huddled together near a shattered console. They were tall and slender, their skin a pale opalescent blue that caught the emergency lights in shifting patterns. One of them was bleeding, a dark, iridescent fluid seeping from a wound in her side. The other stood protectively in front of her, eyes blazing. They spoke to me in a language I didn't know, voices melodic and urgent. I raised my hands, palms open, and activated my translator. It struggled, then latched onto enough meaning to give me fragments. "Please," the uninjured sister said, "do not let us die here." I didn't ask who they were or why they were there. I sealed the breach, stabilized the injured sister, and hauled both of them back to my ship. The Wayfarer's Luck groaned under the strain, but she held together long enough for me to jump to a safer orbit. Their names, I learned, were Sales and Terine, sisters of the Aurelian species, a people rumored to rule a powerful star-spanning empire from a living palace world. Rumored because Aurelians rarely left their territory and even more rarely were seen alone. They had been attacked, they told me, by pirates who knew exactly who they were. Their escort had been destroyed, their escape craft crippled. If I hadn't found them, they would have drifted until the cold took them. I kept them hidden, treated Sales' wound with the limited medical supplies I had. When patrol ships swept the Expanse days later, broadcasting inquiries about missing dignitaries, I said nothing. When a pirate vessel passed close enough to rattle my hull, I powered down and prayed. After a week, Sales could stand on her own. Terine watched me constantly, suspicion never leaving her eyes. Sales, by contrast, was curious. She asked about Earth, about humans, about why someone like me would risk so much for strangers. "I couldn't leave you," I said, because it was the simplest truth. When we finally reached a neutral trade station, they asked me to drop them at the edge of Aurelian space. No official channels. No witnesses. Before they left, Sales took my hand in both of hers. "You have given us life," she said softly. "The Aurelians do not forget such debts." I laughed, awkward and tired. "I don't need a reward." Terine inclined her head. "Nevertheless." Their ship vanished into jump space, and my life returned to its small, scraping orbit. I sold scrap. I patched hulls. I told myself that the sisters would forget me, that whatever gratitude they felt would dissolve under the weight of empire. Years passed. The message arrived on a quiet cycle, encrypted and unmistakably Aurelian. It cut through my ship's systems like a blade through cloth, resolving into a single line of translated text. By decree of the Radiant Throne, you are summoned to the palace of Aurelian. I stared at it for a long time. There was no choice. The coordinates were attached. The jump window precise. Ignoring a summons from the Aurelian Palace was not a thing one did and continued to exist. The journey took me farther than I had ever gone, through space that shimmered with artificial stars and living constructs that guided my ship like patient shepherds. When Aurelian finally filled my viewport, I forgot to breathe. The palace was not a building. It was a world. Great arcs of luminous material curved over oceans of liquid light. Cities grew like coral along vast terraces, their structures alive with motion and color. The planet itself pulsed, as though it were a single, immense organism. My ship was escorted to a landing spire that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. As I disembarked, I was met by a procession of attendants, Aurelians in flowing garments, their eyes reflecting layers of meaning I could barely comprehend. They led me through halls that sang softly as we passed. Images unfolded along the walls, telling stories of conquest and creation, of stars ignited and extinguished by deliberate hands. I felt small, painfully human. In the heart of the palace, beneath a dome that revealed the swirling cosmos above, I saw them again. Sallie stood at the center of the chamber, radiant in ceremonial armor that traced the elegant lines of her form. Terine was beside her, clad in darker hues, her presence sharp and commanding. Between them, on a throne grown from living crystal, sat a figure older and more powerful than both, their mother, the Aurelian Queen. Sallie smiled when she saw me. It was the same smile she had worn aboard my battered ship years ago, and it stole the breath from my lungs. "You came," she said. "How could I not?" I managed. The Queen regarded me with eyes like distant suns. "You saved my daughters," she said, her voice resonating through the chamber. "You did so without knowledge of who they were, and without expectation of reward. Such actions are rare." I shifted, uncomfortable under the weight of her gaze. Anyone would have done the same. Terine snorted softly. Sallie's smile widened. "You are summoned," the Queen continued, "because the debt you are owed has not been repaid, and because circumstances have changed." She gestured, and the air before us shimmered, revealing a star map threaded with lines of conflict. Our enemies grow bold. The attack on my daughters was not an isolated act. It was the beginning of a campaign. Trust within our own ranks has frayed. Sallie stepped forward. "We need someone unbound by Aurelian politics. Someone whose loyalty is proven, not by blood, but by choice." The meaning settled over me slowly, like gravity. "You want me to help you," I said. "A human scavenger. A human who once chose compassion over survival," Terine said. "That makes you dangerous in ways our enemies will not anticipate." I spent the following months within the palace, learning its rhythms, its secrets. I advised where I could, offering a perspective unclouded by centuries of tradition. I traveled with Aurelian envoys to contested systems, my presence a subtle signal that alliances could extend beyond species and stars. And through it all, I grew closer to the sisters. Sallie's was still curious, still warm, her sense of wonder undimmed by power. Terine remained sharp-edged, but her trust, once earned, was unshakable. Together, they were a balance the Empire desperately needed. When the inevitable betrayal came, a high-ranking noble opening the palace gates to enemy forces. It was Terine who detected it, Sales who confronted it, and me who stood between them and the assassin's blade. The wound I took healed quickly under Aurelian care, but the scar remained, a thin white line across my side. In the aftermath, as the palace repaired itself and the enemy was driven back, the queen summoned me once more. "The debt is paid," she said. "And yet, my daughters would have you stay." Sales took my hand, just as she had years before. "You saved us," she said. "Not only then. Now. The palace is stronger for your presence." Terine inclined her head, the gesture deep with meaning. "We would be honored if you chose Aurelian as your home." I thought of the wayfarer's luck, patched and stubborn, waiting in her berth. I thought of the long, lonely stretches of space, of contracts and credits and survival. Then I looked at the sisters, at the living world around us, and felt something settle into place. "I'll stay," I said. The palace sang. In the years that followed, I became something new, a bridge between worlds, a reminder that empires could be built on gratitude as well as fear. Sometimes, when I walked the luminous halls with Sales and Terine at my sides, I remembered the cold debris field where it had all begun. I had saved 2 alien sisters once, thinking it was the end of the story. It turned out it was only the beginning. The palace did not celebrate loudly. There were no explosions of light, no roaring crowds, no triumphant music echoing through the halls. Aurelian did not mark turning points the way humans did. Instead, the world itself shifted. Corridors subtly reoriented. Living walls changed hue. The planet's slow, resonant pulse deepened, as if acknowledging a new constant had been added to its rhythm. I felt it under my feet the night I chose to stay. For the first time since arriving, I was given quarters not as a guest, but as a resident. The chamber overlooked one of Aurelian's internal seas, a vast basin of luminous liquid that glowed softly like liquid starlight. Floating structures drifted across its surface, rearranging themselves in quiet, deliberate patterns. Sales stood beside me, hands folded behind her back, watching the light move. "You are uneasy," she said. "I've spent my whole life moving," I replied. "Staying feels dangerous." She smiled gently. "Staying always is." Terine arrived moments later, her footsteps precise, her posture rigid as ever. Yet there was something different in her eyes now, less guarded, more resolved. "The council has accepted the Queen's decree," she said. "You are recognized as an external sovereign agent of Aurelian. No noble may act against you without invoking treason." I blinked. "That sounds excessive." "It is necessary," Terine said flatly. "Some debts cannot be measured in simple terms." That night, as Aurelian rotated beneath the stars, the palace began sealing the fractures left by betrayal. Living architecture flowed back into place. Entire sections of the world healed themselves, knitting together with organic precision. But wounds of trust were slower to mend. In the cycles that followed, my role became clearer and heavier. I sat in councils where centuries-old rivalries played out in carefully chosen words. I accompanied Sales to negotiations where entire systems waited on her tone alone. I trained alongside Terine, learning how Aurelians thought about conflict, not as a clash, but as an imbalance to be corrected. There were moments I felt impossibly small, and moments when I realized just how much weight my presence carried. It wasn't my strength that mattered, or my intelligence. It was my difference. I asked questions Aurelians didn't ask each other. I noticed patterns they dismissed as tradition. I reminded them, sometimes uncomfortably, that survival did not always mean domination. The enemies of Aurelian tried again. They always do. This time they did not come with fleets. They came with ideas, whispered doubts, manufactured grievances, promises of freedom wrapped in lies. And again, it was the sisters who stood at the center. Salis, who spoke openly to the people, reminding them that fear was not wisdom. Terine, who dismantled conspiracies with ruthless efficiency, refusing to let mercy become weakness. And me, standing where no Aurelian could, moving between factions, speaking to outsiders, proving that loyalty could be chosen rather than inherited. The final attempt came quietly. A device hidden deep within the palace's living core, meant to disrupt Aurelian's consciousness and fracture the world itself. It would have turned the palace into a weapon, or killed it entirely. We found it too late to remove safely. There is one way, Terine said, her voice steady but tight. A manual override. From inside the core. Salis looked at her sister, then at me. The silence that followed felt heavier than vacuum. I didn't hesitate. I'll do it, I said. You are not Aurelian, Salis whispered. The core may reject you. Or it may not, I replied. And if it does, I've survived worse odds. Terine studied me for a long moment, then inclined her head, not as a commander, but as an equal. I will guide you, she said. Every step. The core was beautiful. A vast chamber of living energy, threads of light weaving in endless motion. The planet's thoughts moved there, not words, not images, but intent, purpose, memory. When I entered, the palace noticed. Not as an intruder, as a question. I placed my hands against the interface, feeling heat, pressure, resistance, and then acceptance. The override burned through me like fire, but I held on, following Terine's voice, Salis' presence anchoring me from afar. When it was over, I collapsed onto the living floor, breathing hard, alive. Aurelian stabilized. The threat ended, not with a battle, but with a decision. In the aftermath, the Queen summoned me privately. You could have left, she said. Many times. I know, I replied. And yet you remain. I met her gaze. Because this world chose me back. She studied me for a long moment, then rose from her throne. In saving my daughters, she said, you altered the course of our empire. In staying, you have become part of it. She extended one elegant hand. From this moment, you are bound to Aurelian, not as subject nor servant, but as kin. The declaration rippled through the palace like thunder. Later, as the stars shifted and the palace rested, Salis and Terine joined me at the edge of the luminous sea. You changed everything, Salis said softly. No, I replied. You did. Terine allowed herself a rare, small smile. Then perhaps, she said, we changed it together. Years passed. The Wayfarer's luck remained docked, lovingly maintained, but rarely used. My life no longer drifted from contract to contract. It meant something now. Aurelian endured, stronger, wiser, changed. And sometimes, when the palace grew quiet and the universe seemed impossibly vast, I thought back to a broken ship spinning through a debris field. I had saved 2 alien sisters once, believing it was a single moment of kindness. But kindness, I learned, echoes. It reshapes empires. And sometimes it calls you back, not to repay a debt, but to begin a life you never knew you were meant to live.